The Great Library of Alexandria is perhaps the most famous symbol of lost knowledge in human history. We tend to imagine its destruction as a single moment of tragedy, a grand fire in which scrolls are reduced to ashes, taking with them the wisdom of the ancient world. In reality, it was a long process of decline that stretched over centuries, from an accidental fire under Julius Caesar to the decrees of Emperor Theodosius in its final abandonment. The result was a break in the scientific tradition. Mathematics, astronomy, mechanics, and medicine were thrown back. Europe plunged into centuries when knowledge had to be gathered bit by bit, rewriting surviving copies in monastic scriptoria. It took us more than 1,000 years to simply return to the level of understanding of the world that was already available to Hellenistic scholars. But history could have taken a different course. Imagine a scenario where the chain of knowledge transfer is not interrupted, where a library is not just a repository of papyri, but a living, continuously operating university that survives the change of empires, religions, and rulers. Where the works of Archimedes, Euclid, and Heron did not become legends, but served as textbooks for future generations of engineers. This is a world in which the steam engine appears not in foggy 18th century England, but under the bright Mediterranean sun 1,000 years earlier. This is a story about how the preservation of one institution changes the fate of an entire civilization. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the history of science and technology could have changed. To understand the scale of the loss, you first need to realize what the Library of Alexandria really was. It was not just a building with shelves. It was the museum, the Temple of the Muses, the world's first state-run research institute. It was here that Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth with remarkable accuracy, using only the shadow of a stick in his knowledge of geometry. It was here that Aristarchus of Samos, 1,500 years before Copernicus, proposed that the Earth revolves around the sun. Here, doctors such as Herophilus studied anatomy and the nervous system, laying the foundations of medicine that Europe would not return to for a very long time. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls were stored in the halls of the museum, but the main treasure was not paper, but the environment. It was a meeting place for the best minds of the Mediterranean. Engineers created amazing mechanisms, from water clocks to automatic temple doors. Hero's famous Iolipoli, a ball rotated by steam, was created right here. In our history, it remained a fun toy, a curiosity for the entertainment of the nobility. An economy based on cheap labor did not require machines. However, in addition to economic reasons, the library was hit by an ideological and political crisis. In the 4th century AD, against the backdrop of religious unrest, science began to be perceived as something suspicious associated with old cults. The Serapeum, a subsidiary library and temple, was destroyed and the scientists scattered. The thread of continuity was broken. Knowledge became scattered fragments, hidden in Byzantium and later picked up by Arab translators. But what if, at this critical moment, common sense had prevailed over emotions? What if the events of the late 4th century had unfolded differently? Let's go back to 391. In our story, Emperor Theodosius I issues an edict banning pagan cults, leading to conflicts in Alexandria and the destruction of the Serapeum. In the alternative version, events unfold more slowly. Tension is growing in Alexandria, but the city authorities understand that any careless action could lead to bloodshed. Therefore, they try to maintain order and look for ways to delay the implementation of the edict in order to avoid an outbreak of violence between supporters of the old beliefs and Christian groups. In the alternative scenario, the local prefect and the head of the philosophical school find a diplomatic solution. They not only convince the imperial administration in Constantinople that the library is a state archive, but also give examples of how knowledge has helped the empire in the past. They emphasize that it was thanks to scientific treatises that engineers were able to strengthen walls, and doctors were able to improve treatment methods. Referring to these achievements, they proposed that the repository be considered an important tool for the future power of the empire. They also convinced the capital that the library does not pose a threat to the new religious policy because it has long since ceased to be a place of active religious practice. The prefect assures officials that philosophers work with geometry, medicine, astronomy, and history, not rituals. Thanks to this, the idea of the institution's neutrality becomes more convincing, and imperial advisors begin to perceive the Serapeum as a useful center of learning rather than a relic of paganism. Instead of allowing the crowd to approach the walls of the Serapeum, the prefect posts guards and declares the complex an imperial repository of wisdom. At the same time, he addresses the people, explaining that the building is now protected by law and serves all citizens, not some religious movement. A gradual secularization of knowledge takes place. The city's residents are surprised, but many accept this logic, as the Serapeum has long been associated with scholarship and crafts. The statues of the gods are carefully removed, but the scrolls, astrolabes, drawings, and, most importantly, the staff of copyists and scholars remain in place. This brings relief to the philosophers because they can continue their activities without fear. At the same time, it shows Christian communities that the authorities are not trying to preserve the old cult, but are only protecting useful knowledge. This eases tensions, and the city gradually gets used to the complex's new role. The library changes its name but retains its essence. It becomes neutral territory, protected by law, and people begin to perceive it as part of the state infrastructure. Mathematics and astronomy are declared instruments for ordering God's world, which allows scientists to continue their research without being suspected of promoting old beliefs. This justification makes their work legitimate and even useful in the eyes of the clergy. Gradually, a new atmosphere develops in Alexandria, where scientific pursuits are respected as a matter of strengthening the empire. Scientists began to interact more frequently with officials, explaining to them the importance of the exact sciences for road construction, land management, and calendar compilation. As a result, the authorities began to encourage the preservation of old treatises because they helped solve practical problems. Instead of fleeing to Persia or going underground, Alexandria's intellectual elite continued their work. Teachers realized that their knowledge was in demand and began to accept more students. The School of Commentators, which in reality was only concerned with preserving the remnants of the past, now actively develops new ideas. It becomes a place where young students are introduced not only to classical texts, but also to new interpretations and observations. Apollonius's texts on conic sections, which had been forgotten for centuries in our history, are given a new lease on life here. Scientists begin to rewrite them with more accurate copies, and teachers include them in the curriculum for engineers and architects of the Byzantine Empire. This allows the mechanical sciences to develop much earlier and precise calculations to be applied in the design of complex structures. Working with old texts inspires scientists to create new commentaries and research. They begin to discuss ideas about the movement of celestial bodies, analyze geometric calculations, and attempt to refine measurement methods. Thanks to this, knowledge is not only preserved but also updated, and Alexandria once again becomes a center of scientific research as it was in the Hellenistic era. The continuity of education is preserved. The library becomes a symbol of continuity, uniting the ancient heritage and the new Christian culture. Students from different cities come to Alexandria to study in an atmosphere of tolerance and respect for knowledge. This helps the empire maintain a high level of literacy among officials and develop engineering schools, which will later play an important role in strengthening state borders. As a result of this alternative development, Alexandria becomes a more stable and respected scientific center. The prefect is recognized for his ability to combine the political will of the emperor with the interests of scientists. The city gradually becomes an example of how peaceful solutions and respect for knowledge can change the fate of important cultural institutions. This scenario helps us imagine what history might have looked like if key decisions had been made differently. It shows that even in a period of religious transformation, it is possible to preserve space for science and education if a reasonable compromise is found between traditions and the demands of a new era. And the main question remains open. How far could human thought have progressed if Alexandria had preserved its main repository of knowledge? Let us imagine for a moment how the transfer of knowledge would have changed with the change of civilizations. In the 7th century, Alexandria came under the control of the Arab Caliphate. In our reality, this was a time when many books had already been lost, and those that remained required complex translation from forgotten languages. In this scenario, the Arab commander Amr ibn al-As enters the city and sees not ruins, but a functioning university. The Islamic world, which at that time was experiencing a turbulent, passionate rise and a thirst for knowledge, does not destroy this institution, but integrates it. It is not the age of translation that begins, but the age of cooperation. Arab scholars do not spend 200 years searching for and deciphering ancient manuscripts. They sit down at the same tables with the Greek-speaking guardians of Alexandria. An instant synthesis takes place. The Indian positional number system, the numbers we use today, which came from the East, meets Greek geometry and logic right in the halls of Alexandria as early as the 8th century. In our history, this process took centuries and took place in Baghdad with great difficulty. Here, however, the fusion of two powerful streams of thought occurs quickly and efficiently. Al-Khwarizmi, the father of algebra, gains access to the original works of Diophantus without distortion. Instead of rediscovering the basics, the scholars of the Caliphate started from a high base. Alexandria became the second intellectual center, alongside Baghdad, creating a powerful axis of science. By the 9th century, a new scientific discipline combining algebra and geometry had formed here, something that Descartes would only achieve in our history in the 17th century. One detail, and the chain of consequences takes on a different logic. The existence of a continuous tradition of glass blowing in Egypt, multiplied by the surviving works of Ptolemy on optics, leads to an early technological breakthrough. In our story, Ibn al-Haytham, al-Hasan, wrote the fundamental book of optics in the 11th century, laying the foundations for understanding light. In this world, he does not work alone, but draws on the experimental base of the Alexandrian school. The quality of glass and the understanding of light refraction made it possible to create the first lenses not as decorations, but as scientific instruments as early as 1000 AD. First, eyeglasses appeared, which prolonged the active life of scientists and copyists for decades. An experienced craftsman no longer went blind by the age of 40 from working with small details. Then in the middle of the 11th century, one of the students of the Alexandrian school connected two lenses in a tube. The first spyglass appeared. This changed everything, from military affairs, the ability to see the enemy's fleet on the horizon, to astronomy. The sky ceased to be a sphere of immovable lights. Scientists saw Jupiter's moons in the phases of Venus 600 years before Galileo. Ptolemy's geocentric model, which had dominated our history for 500 years, collapsed under the weight of observable facts as early as the 12th century. The world learns that the Earth is a planet revolving around the Sun. This discovery does not cause such shock and resistance as in our Europe of the Reformation era, because it takes place in the milieu of mathematicians and astronomers, where scientific discussion has not been interrupted. Navigation received a powerful boost. Tables of the movements of celestial bodies became incredibly accurate. The military technological block of our scenario shows how abstract science is transformed into concrete and metal. The most intriguing aspect of preserved Alexandria is the fate of Heron's steam turbine. In reality, it was forgotten because society did not have the materials or the need for it. But in this world, thanks to the development of chemistry and metallurgy, which flourished in the East, by the 12th century, engineers had access to strong alloys. Heron's surviving drawings were reinterpreted. Instead of a toy, a pump was created. The first application was not trains, but mining and irrigation. In Egypt and Syria, steam pumps began to be used to lift water from the Nile and pump water from deep mines. This was not an English-style industrial revolution with black smoke and slums, but a slow but sure introduction of mechanics. Steam power replaced the muscle power of animals and humans where it was critically important. Steam-powered cranes appeared in the port of Alexandria, capable of unloading ships many times faster. This changes the economy. Slave labor becomes less profitable than servicing machinery. There is a demand for educated engineers capable of repairing and improving fire engines. A class of technical intelligentsia is formed. By the 13th century, technology had spread to Europe via Sicily and Spain. Water and windmills, which had been actively developed in our history during the Middle Ages, were supplemented by the first atmospheric engines. Europe, which had not experienced a deep decline in science during the Dark Ages, took up the baton. How might the course of history have changed if geographical problems had been solved differently? With accurate astronomical instruments and mathematics at the level of the 17th century AD, the problem of determining longitude at sea was solved by 1300. Sailors no longer need to sail along the coast. Fear of the open ocean gives way to calculation. Maps created in Alexandria are refined by generations of captains who use optical instruments for navigation. The Atlantic Ocean ceased to be an insurmountable barrier. The journey to the west was undertaken not as Columbus' desperate adventure, based on a miscalculation, but as a well-prepared expedition. Contact with America probably occurs in the mid-14th century, and this is not a chance discovery, but a systematic exploration. Ships equipped with improved sails and, possibly, primitive auxiliary steam winches cross the ocean faster and safer. The Columbian Exchange, the movement of plants, animals, and goods, began earlier. Potatoes, corn, and tomatoes reached the Mediterranean, preventing famine and contributing to a population explosion. But there is a downside. The epidemics that devastated the New World in the 16th century in our history arrive earlier. The history of American civilizations changes dramatically, but contact occurs at a time when the military gap between the old and new worlds is not yet as catastrophic as it was under Cortez. Gunpowder develops in parallel in this world, but may not be the only factor of dominance. Let us compare the known outcome with a possible alternative in the field of medicine. In real history, the development of anatomy was halted for centuries due to strict religious prohibitions on the dissection of human bodies. Many works by ancient physicians were lost, and the knowledge once possessed by Galen and Herophilus disappeared from practice. Doctors were forced to rely on guesswork, tradition, and the authority of ancient texts, unable to test their ideas in practice. This led to any operations being considered extremely dangerous, and many diseases being explained by the influence of spirits and an imbalance of bodily fluids. In such an environment, medicine for many centuries became a combination of superstitions, prayers, and procedures that did more harm than good. The most common method of treatment was bloodletting, which was used for almost all diseases, from fever to colds. Not only did it fail to alleviate the condition of patients, but it often led to a weakening of the body. Doctors did not understand how blood circulation worked and believed that disease could be removed from the body along with the blood. This misconception became so firmly established that it remained in medicine until modern times. In the preserved world of Alexandria, things are different. The anatomical theater created back in the Hellenistic era continues to operate without interruption, and scientists have the opportunity to systematically study the structure of the human body. Doctors learn not from fragments of knowledge that have come down to them, but from real experience, observing organs, vessels, and nerves. Thanks to this, medical schools develop a clear understanding of how the various systems of the body function. Such knowledge becomes the basis for more accurate diagnosis and a cautious approach to surgery. The understanding of the circulatory system did not come with Harvey in the 17th century, but many centuries earlier. Scientists working in Alexandria and its sister schools in the East gradually noticed the patterns of blood flow and established the connection between the heart and the vascular network. They understood that blood did not move through the body on its own, but under the force created by the heart. This discovery became one of the most important because it allowed them to abandon misconceptions and approach modern physiology long before the Renaissance. But the main breakthrough is again linked to the development of optics. When the microscope appeared in the 12th or 13th century, following the improvement of telescopes, humanity gained the opportunity to look into the invisible world. The first glass lenses became accurate enough to magnify the smallest structures, and scientists saw for the first time what had previously seemed impossible. Doctors discovered tiny creatures moving in a drop of water and in biological fluids. This shock forced a rethinking of previous explanations of diseases. The miasma theory, according to which diseases arose from bad air, began to lose its significance. It was replaced by the understanding that diseases could be caused by living organisms that were transmitted from person to person or through contaminated water. This discovery did not lead to the immediate appearance of medicines, but it did change attitudes towards hygiene. Doctors began to wash their hands before seeing patients, boil their instruments, and carefully monitor the cleanliness of their premises. The first attempts were made to isolate patients in order to prevent the spread of infection. Quarantine measures became scientifically based rather than dictated by fear or blind adherence to tradition. Scientists studied the ways in which diseases were transmitted and gradually formed an understanding of the need to break the chain of infection. Special houses for the sick were set up in cities, and rules were introduced to regulate the handling of contaminated goods. Public health becomes an important part of government policy because the well-being of entire regions depends on it. When the Black Death reached Europe and the Middle East in the 14th century, the world was already prepared for it. People understood that the disease was not transmitted through the air, but through living carriers, and knew that it was necessary to limit contact between the population. Monasteries and city authorities introduced strict measures to reduce the spread of infection. Doctors explained the need for isolation based on observations rather than religious prescriptions. This changed people's attitudes toward the epidemic and made it possible to act more decisively and in a more organized manner. The epidemic still deals a heavy blow because the plague remains a deadly disease, but isolation, disinfection, and control measures against carriers significantly reduce the mortality rate. People avoid large gatherings, monitor the condition of water bodies, and try to destroy rodents that carry infected fleas. Thanks to this, the disease spreads more slowly, and some cities are spared from complete devastation. The world begins to understand that epidemics can be controlled. Europe and the East emerged from the crisis more quickly, preserving more human resources and avoiding a deep economic collapse. Literacy rates do not fall as sharply because families and communities do not lose as many people. Industry and agriculture recover more quickly, and cities are not abandoned. The demographic dip is not as deep, and the new generation grows up in an environment where knowledge and skills are passed on without long interruptions. This creates the conditions for an earlier economic recovery. Cities recover more quickly, and trade revives almost immediately after the epidemic subsides. People begin to travel again, exchange knowledge, and develop crafts. This scenario makes the world more resilient to future threats and changes the entire course of European development. By 1500, when the High Renaissance is just beginning in our history, this alternative world looks completely different. It is not a world of frescoes and statues, although art also flourishes, but a world of early industrialization. The center of the world is not the Atlantic, but the Mediterranean. Alexandria, Constantinople, Venice, and Genoa Our megacities connected by a network of sea routes traveled by fast ships. The chimneys of the first steam-powered factories smoke in the ports. The textile industry is mechanized. Printing, which appeared earlier due to the high demand for technical documentation, spreads knowledge at an incredible speed. Literacy is the norm for city dwellers, as working with complex mechanisms requires education. The scientific method, observation, hypothesis, experiment, has been the accepted standard for several centuries. The universities of Bologna, Baghdad, Oxford, and Alexandria teach physics, mechanics, and higher mathematics rather than scholasticism. Politically, the world is perhaps more stable. Enlightened monarchies and trading republics understand the benefits of scientific and technological progress. Religious wars, if they occur, are less fierce, as pragmatism and trade smooth out contradictions. Humanity is on the verge of discovering electricity and internal combustion engines, 300 years ahead of our timeline. We see a civilization that has saved itself 1,000 years of development simply by not allowing the torch of knowledge to be extinguished. The story we have painted is not a utopia. This world would also have its wars, conflicts, and crises. Human nature is immutable, and new technologies are often used to create more sophisticated weapons. However, this scenario clearly shows the price of oblivion. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria was not just the loss of old books. It was the loss of methodology, the loss of the very habit of exploring the world rationally. Preserving a continuous scientific tradition would have made it possible to avoid the Dark Ages, to unite Eastern mathematics and Western philosophy earlier, to see the stars through a telescope and microbes through a microscope earlier. We could now be living in a world that is several centuries ahead of ours, solving the problems of interstellar flight, rather than just mastering orbit. History teaches us that knowledge is fragile. It takes centuries to accumulate, but can be lost in a single day. And perhaps the main lesson of Alexandria is not that it burned down, but that we must cherish what we have today. Subscribe so you don't miss new versions of history.